Dan with the Skull Sessions podcast, and today my guest is Peter Bartsocas. Is that correct?
Yep, you said it
And
right.
Why don't you tell me about a little bit about your legendary career as a musician?
I wouldn't call it too legendary. Well, I did start pretty much around 15 years old. I got a band quickly together in South Florida with some friends that I had met basically at shows. And then within a few months after doing that for a while, I started playing bass for Morning Again. That kind of really
Okay.
got me, uh, got my chops a little tighter, and just was able to see how a real band would operate,
You know,
and because those guys were a little.
I
What's
gave
that?
John Wiley his first tattoo ever.
Really?
Yeah, and I remember that he I mean, granted, I'd only been tattooing like 4 years at that point, but he backed out of the tattoo like I don't know, an hour and a half into it, and then so I never finished it. And then he owned a tattoo shop much later, and he showed me, he was like, "Hey, I have a tattoo by Dan Henk," and they're like, "Let me see that," and be like, "Oh man, let me fix it up for you," and he'd be like, "No, no, it's a legendary Dan Henk tattoo." So, and I keep asking him, and he won't let me touch it either.
Oh wow, he likes it that way. I guess that's awesome.
Well, he thinks it's kind of funny. I mean, it is kind of funny, but he thinks it's kind of funny. Like, hey, I have an early Dan Hink tattoo.
Yeah, that's great, man. Um, so yeah, that's kind of my first foray into a real band situation, and I did that for probably 6 to 8 months until they got offered a pretty sweet tour in Europe, and at that point, just I wasn't able to do that with being 15 and barely able to drive.
Oh, you were 15 at the time?
I was 15 when I joined the band, and then I think probably when we got asked to go to Europe, that's when I was like, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do that, and I handed off the baton to Jerry, who was a good friend of mine at the time. So yeah, that was kind of the thing, and I started focusing in on Bird of Ill Omen pretty much soon after that because I always played
Who was the
guitar anyway.
singer of Morning Again at that time?
At that time was Kevin. It was
Okay.
basically right after Damien and Eric left, and then the uh, the Ohio contingency moved down.
So you started Bird of Ill Omen. Bird of Ill Omen, I think Morning Again's like very like Slayer influence. Like at least the riffs have a heavy Slayer sound to them.
Definitely, yeah.
And I think Bird of Ill Omen was a little bit more like more death metal mixed with hardcore. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, the history with Bird of Ill Omen is interesting too. I mean, South Florida in general just had such a incestuous relationship with members, and a lot of those kind of things. Like, so Damien, who sang in Morning Again, also originally had started the band with Tom, Bird of Ill Omen with Tom and George Rios, who kind of facilitated the early like vibe of the songs and the riffs and all that stuff. So a lot of hands kind of went into crafting the early sound of the band. So when I joined in, uh, basically Damien was still singing for the band and probably played like a handful of shows, and then he moved to Gainesville to do Culture full time. And then so that was basically when I joined the band. We started writing more with me and Andrew eventually joining
Were
again.
you signed to Eulogy at that point?
Signed is a loose term, but yeah, we were the first release, I guess, essentially 001, but uh, Red Letter Day or some other record came out actually before ours because John's first time doing it, I guess, kind of messed up our whole CD production and all that stuff. So we didn't end up getting it until the second release was actually out.
Okay.
Uh, yeah. So, whatever, you live when you learn, and at that time we were like pretty excited to have a CD out. And then, a little bit later we did the LP too. So yeah, we were just excited enough to just have anything out. So we were okay with it.
Yeah, well, everybody's kids at that point, so
Yeah,
nobody knows really what they're doing.
exactly. I was 16, maybe about to, yeah, 16 years old when we did that first recording.
Well, I remember when I first heard your music, and I had like a number of metal friends, like just straight up metalhead friends that I played for. They're like, "Wow, like what band is that?" Like, so it seems like a lot of metal people like glommed onto you even more than hardcore people. Did you notice that?
We definitely had more leanings of that, especially being in Florida. There's a lot more of that death metal influence coming in. Uh, a lot of the Miami shows too that we ended up playing were uh, more geared towards a metal crowd, perhaps. Like we played with Malevolent Creation, played with
Awesome band. Yeah.
yeah, a few of those local bands that I guess through our drummer at the time, George, he was way into that metal scene. So he, you know, like I said, he would like kind of bring in riffs, and a lot of the influences of that stuff was from him, and a little bit, the early incarnation of the band.
Did you play with any of the big dogs in the death metal scene, like the band Death or
No,
Obituary?
never play with any like the Tampa Greats or anything like that. But yeah, we were always kind of more geared towards the hardcore crowd and shows. Like that was kind of our connections and our our wheelhouse, I guess.
Well, I saw a bunch of flyers. Like, you guys did tours. How far out of Florida did you venture for the tours?
Well, we ended up doing uh I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks with Morning Again uh on a summer tour, and then we went all the way up to Canada to play Toronto, and back, basically East Coast. So it was like maybe 2.5 weeks, and that was a lot of fun, and it was great that Morning Again, John Wiley, like was able to bring us on and really got us out there. I think if it wasn't for that tour, we probably wouldn't have had the reach that we did, as little as it was. It's my dog going off right now for a little bit.
That's all right. I'm a dog person.
Yeah,
Dogs are cool.
he's gonna calm down in a bit anyway. So if you want to let it out.
So, I know with Morning Again, like Revelation picked them up, and I think that kind of exposed them to a wider audience. Did you
Yeah.
have like any other labels that came after you?
I don't recall exactly. I think after we did that 4-song EP with John, we were kind of done playing with each together. So
Right.
we hadn't
Yeah, I was gonna
really
say you
like
didn't have
I
the
think
output of like Morning Again and like the
yeah,
constant training
we maybe
members.
stuck around to play more and write more stuff. I think yeah, that would have been a good pivot off of that. But yeah, we hadn't really thought about it. I think Tom, who played bass, he was at that time a little bit more of like the spearheading of like, oh, I was talking to this label and this could be cool, like for a comp or a split with this band, or he was very connected on that level. And here and there I would dabble, but like between him and I, or he was just more like uh in touch with those kind of conversations.
Yeah, I could see you guys doing a split with like Napalm Death or something, kind of like Coalesced with Napalm Death.
Yeah, that would be, yeah, exactly. Something like that. We definitely I don't know if it was like a pipe dream or whatever, but at that time Steve from Shy Halud and I would hang out a lot and like just kind of riff around. And we always talked about it'd be fun to do a cover split 7-inch with Shai Hulud.
Oh, I've
Call it
been
the
called
Bird
to do
versus
that. I
the
did a
Worm.
bunch of artwork for Shai Hulud.
Yeah, exactly. So it was just, just kind of like a fun idea to talk about, but never materialized. But because at that time we didn't really have a drummer. So Steve and Andrew, the other guitar player for Bird, and myself would practice a few times doing like a Tori Amos cover. We were kind of fooling around with this one song that, like, Steve's such a great drummer that it just made it sound awesome, whatever it was anyway. So
Did
we're
you
like,
get
oh, it'd be
that
great to record.
throwdown cover of Sir Mix-a-Lot, Baby Got Back? Have you heard it though?
No.
So it's like throwdown, with their like kind of like a aggressive hardcore sound doing
Yeah,
Baby Got Back, but with like double bass drums and everything. It's pretty awesome, actually.
I got to check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan of a good cover for sure.
I'm not a huge fan of Throwdown, but that cover is amazing.
All right, I'll have to check it out. Yeah.
So I noticed like when your first album came out, it's a lot rougher than your second album. Like the second album seemed a little more like groove based and polished. Was that a conscious decision, or do you think that was just an evolution?
I mean, so the first album, those 6 songs were basically a culmination of uh, a band that had several members leave, like in the early stages. So those riffs were holdovers from that era with Damien, and so it definitely had a sound and a style. And we had our original drummer at the time, so he was more like that groove. I don't know if you're familiar with Brethren. He
Yeah.
also played in that band, so he's got that like kind of groove hip hop kind of feel on a lot of the stuff, which worked great. And he always had like incredible uh, arrangement ideas and just influences. So that was, part of that sound, I guess, but also the production part of it was we ended up going in the studio that I don't think the people there, I think the guy was kind of like, he was into hair metal maybe, so he didn't really know what to think of our kind of brand of metal.
That would have been a great cover, like if you did a Def Leppard cover or something.
Actually, some of the guitar cabinets he had there were from Winger. He said like they belonged to Kip Winger, and I was like,
Right.
all right, whatever, if true, even, who cares as long as they work. But yeah, so it was it was a nice studio, but I don't think, and it was all recorded to DAT, and it has like just this very, like you said, like very polished, clean type of production, which I didn't really know any better at the time. But I know
Right.
going to Jeremy Staska for the next thing that was like for me, especially just, listening to all those records that had been recorded there for years at that point. I was like, okay, this is a real place, the studio that I want to go to. And the difference that I noticed was that he was doing shit in analog. He was recording on real. So there is a little difference there, but also the music we kind of wrote more of as a unit of that lineup, as opposed to the first record was like more culmination of a bunch of different influences and riffs and other players.
Well, I noticed a lot of people like right around like for instance when Dillinger's album came out, they were heavily influenced. It seemed like everybody was doing, their next album with like a more like math metal influence. Like I remember like Drowning Man was a little bit more one way, and then they got a lot more technical on the release, and it seemed like right after Dillinger that was a big influence. I was wondering, was there a big influence on you? Because you didn't do that with your EP. It wasn't like you suddenly got more math metal. But I'm just wondering if there other feels or vibes or bands you toured with, they kind of had that impact on you?
100%. Especially you brought up Dillinger. Like, I think we were friendly with what's his name? Matt, I think, from Now or Never,
Okay.
right? I think he put out the first EP for Dillinger. Anyway, but it had that like a doll face with the
Yes,
snake.
yeah, I have it. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah.
Dead Guy influence, and I'm
Yeah,
a
exactly.
huge Dead Guy fan.
I
Yeah.
remember getting that while we were on tour and putting it in, and we're like, what the fuck is this? And like okay, we gotta like really study this thing and like understand where that's heading, because it was just like above and beyond like anything that we heard in our scene, at least, you know. So it was definitely on our radar, a lot of those bands. um but yeah, like we certainly, so yeah, the first record, I feel like it was just like a kind of, like I said, a culmination of a bunch of other ideas that we were playing around with since the inception of the band. And then the second record is like everybody kind of having a better understanding of what we want to sound like too, you know,
Okay.
and writing more towards being a little bit less slow and groovy and kind of have a little bit more intensity and uh like, yeah, just kind of keeping the intensity high and not having so many dynamics. I feel like the first release is like kind of has a groove, rings out, sets the next part, you know, has a lot of more dynamic and like ebb and flow. And I feel like the second one is a little bit more, you know, intense, if that makes sense. Like more
Yeah,
like
no,
high
I agree. It's
energy.
more intense. I think that like almost every band is like this. I mean, it could be Mudhoney, it could be any
Yeah.
band that first album that they come out with. They've probably been working on the song for like 10 years. So now
Mm,
all the songs have like coalesced into amazing ideas. They might not have the best production, but they're
right.
great songs. And
Hmm.
then often when they put out the next album or the next CP or whatever the next release is, they haven't had as long to sit on the songs. So the songs are way better produced and often more polished, but maybe they're lacking some of the ideas, or maybe there just aren't as many that are like just bang you in the head.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the uh yeah, it takes the band X amount to do the first one, and then it's not like we felt rushed to do anything for the second one, but like we definitely wrote together. It's not like we were like, oh, I've been holding on to this riff for a while, you know, like it was just kind of very naturally like, hey, this is how we're gonna write, you know, together. And that the second recording is also different because we had a different drummer, because we so we've basically have had three drummers. uh George, the original drummer, who's passed away now a few years from cancer. So
Sucks. Yeah, cancer. Cancer
yeah,
sucks.
yeah, it's the worst. And so, but you know, back in the day, he was replaced by this guy Jose, and when we went on a tour, he got deported uh to Spain or something like that for a while. So he was kind of out of commission. So when we started to like entertain the idea of like, hey, we got some momentum with some of these ideas that we had kicking around, we're like, got this guy Noel who jumped in and like we wrote together with him. So it's kind of, we had our, you know, our skeletons of the songs, but like bringing him in and doing his feel on the recording and on the songs were like, you know, that's kind of attributes to a lot of the difference too on the grooves and the writing style of that record. And he was coming from, I mean, the band before he was playing was kind of like more of like a Good Riddance, fast lagwagony type of punk
Right.
band. But he had those like, you know, just those chops to pretty much do whatever. So
Well,
we would,
fortunately, your band sounded nothing like those bands.
yeah. I mean, he's a very talented drummer. Like he would take direction, and we would like just feed him influences. Like, hey, check out this song. Like, this is the kind of drumming like I envisioned for this part or this track. You know, so it was we were able to work with him a lot, and you know, he was definitely in the hardcore scene in South Florida, so he knew a lot of the bands that we were playing with, and he knew the style. I think he went on to play in a couple other like hardcore bands in that area too. But don't hold me to that.
So what caused you guys to break up?
Like I said, we were young. I mean, I certainly was. I think we finished that recording on the 4-song EP, and I was maybe 17.
Oh, that's when you finished the EP. You were 17.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, the band for me was like 2 years, two and a
Right.
half years, maybe. And then, uh, yeah, we finished that recording, and around that time, there was just a lot of like personal stuff that was coming up with everybody, the members, and uh, also our singer Shane. He was kind of Oh yeah, he was trying to move to Toronto because he had met a girl up there, and he ended up being up there for a long time, uh, hitched up with her, and so that kind of put things on a back burner. And then the Gainesville scene at that time, 96, 97 was pretty happening. So I was trying to move there, uh, and
What,
yeah,
Gainesville, Florida?
yeah, Gainesville, Florida.
Yeah, I lived there for 3 years. My my dad went to college there.
Oh, okay, nice.
I liked
Yeah,
it
it was.
because, like, I was in high school, but I was like trying to be an artist, and there are lots of like, bookstores and indie comic shops, and lots of people that are like, it seems like they're doing the thing.
Yeah, it's a college town. Like you're gonna find, you know, your people there for sure. Anywhere, like, and if whatever you're looking for, and it's at the time it was pretty damn affordable, and just the idea of just being able to have somewhat of my own place up there was a lot more affordable than doing it in Miami or Fort Lauderdale, or at the time, like, basically moved up there when I was 17. So I could just like rent a room at somebody's house. I didn't have to get on my own lease or whatever. So it was pretty nice transition to do so. And I think that's kind of what split up the band in total. Like everybody was just kind of want to do different things. And, we were young. We were like, not really, I probably, thinking, oh, that's just another band, and I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to do other things with my life. And so it was just, we hadn't really, and like I said, like there was a little bit of that friction, so it was easy to just like, okay, that's done, let's move on.
Right. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize, 'cause, like, when their favorite bands break up, and they're like, "What happened?" They don't realize that band's been like a touring band for like 5 years. You don't make money off metalcore, no matter how great it sounds. You don't make money off it. You probably made more money off the shows than you did off the label, just from album sales, because it's not in like Tower Records, which doesn't exist anymore. But
Yeah, the physical copies aren't what's driving the band either. Like, yeah, we toured maybe 2 times, and one of them was a complete disaster because our drummer at the time was held at the border and was not let back into the country to finish our tour. So that was the beginning of the end for us. Like, kind of, we lost out on a lot of opportunities and like momentum with that happening. So it kind of like took some wind out of our sails, I guess you could say.
right.
And then it took us like maybe another year after that to like come up with the arrangement for the next record, and who's gonna like play drums. And how are we gonna, you know, get a different singer, or okay, we can still work with Shane, and Shane would like come down and do his thing. And yeah, it was just kind of, we felt like, you know, it had run its course, and
What
that's
happened with the drummer and the border?
he
Like,
eventually got it all figured out, but it was uh he was away for a few years before he could.
right.
But yeah, I think he's back down in South Florida. And
Yeah, I know that Canada is really hardcore. I flew there once and I didn't get a visa to tattoo, but I was going to tattoo there. And so they banned me for a year. They fingerprinted me. They shipped me back. Yeah, I know they're super hardcore.
yeah, well, it wasn't Canada, it was the States. The
Okay.
US was giving him a hard time coming back in because they thought we were trying to smuggle him in. It was like all this, like we got hemmed up there for a while. I was like, at one point, I was like calling my parents. I'm like, do we have a lawyer that we can like? I think I might, you know, need a lawyer up here. So, but luckily we didn't get to, you know, it didn't come down on us eventually. So it was a misunderstanding on his part. Like, it's crazy. Like, you know, when you're a kid, you have no idea. Yeah, we played like a couple shows on the East Coast, going up to Canada, and then we get, you know, we're all in the van pulling up to the border, and everybody's got their passports, I think, at the time. And you know, it's not like our drummer didn't know that we're going to Canada. He had the itinerary. We talked about it, and he's like, "Okay, Pat." The guy, you know, at the border comes in, like, "All right, passports. All right." Looks at everybody's passports and goes one by one to every single person in the van. Are you a U.S. citizen? Yes. U.S. citizen? Yes. U.S. citizen? Yes. Then he points to the drummer, and he goes, "What should I say?" I was like, and that's when the guy at the border patrol was like, pull over. I
Great.
was like, but yeah, so he had a student visa that had expired. And like I said, when you're young, you don't really think about these things and how they're
Right.
going to affect you, you know? You're just like, oh, yeah, I'm good.
So
But
you guys went on two tours total?
uh yeah, but we did like some weekend kind of, you know, 2 3 days here and there type of thing. But yeah, that was basically it. 2 East Coast tours.
Okay. It seems
Yeah.
like back in the day, I mean, I'm old, I'll admit,
Uh-huh.
but it seems like back in the day, like in the early 2000s, all sorts of bands would play together, all sorts of bands would tour together, and often they were very, very different. Like you might have Sick of Doll playing with like, Coalesce playing with like a more pop punk band,
Yeah.
now it seems like people more stick to like their genres.
Hmm. Yeah, I do like the mixed bill show myself. Coming from South Florida, that's kind of what I always thought was a show. Like, you have, you know, your ska band, you have your punk band, your hardcore band, and then, you know, some amalgamation of one of those genres or something. Like, the local scene at least was always like that. It was always like not exactly four bands that sound like, you know, Madball or something, you know.
Right. Yeah, there are way too many bands that took that style. Like, what's really funny is when you see the European like tough guy Bronx bands, but they're from Europe, so
Yeah,
they're trying to do the Freddie Madball sort of vibe,
right,
but
right.
it's not coming off right.
Hmm.
I think those are the most amusing. And I did a convention once where they were all playing Johnny Cash covers, but English wasn't their native language. So they're putting the emphasis on the wrong things and they're going, ha, between every other word. It's like, yeah, it's kind of
Right,
funny.
right. It's it's called, is that called cultural appropriation?
Well, actually, I think cultural appropriation. I mean, as long as you give the person credit, is a good thing because it all gets out there. Everybody gets like influenced by everyone else.
Right, exactly.
So, what would you say were like the craziest lineups that you were a part of? Like was it all kind of bands that were more or less along the metalcore eulogy vibe, or did you get like some really diverse bands? Because I remember seeing you guys, like I see your name on flyers with a whole bunch of disparate bands.
Yeah, I mean, especially all like the local kind of shows that we would get to play were more of the metalcore, I guess, style. Overcast, when they were coming through, we would try to get billed with that, or
Yeah, I
basically we
saw
would go.
Overcast recently for a reunion show,
Yeah,
and they were super tight.
yeah, I bet. I mean, those guys are still like players. I believe in other bands as well, right? Um,
Yeah, I think the singer Brian is in Shadows Fall.
yeah, yeah. So we, especially in that local scene at the time, like we would kind of like hear, oh, this band is coming to town. We're gonna go after like the club or the show promoter and like try to get on that show. So if we were fans of whoever was coming through, we would you know put in our hat in the ring, so to speak, to get on those bills. But like, yeah, a band like uh Coalesce we got to play with in Staten Island. It was probably one of the first shows on that Morning Again tour, which was like really a great, you know, uh, start to something like that. And we were real stoked to play with them. And who else did we get to play?
Yeah, I
Um,
remember seeing them come down high, and like it was a relapse, like a big festival of like 20 bands, and they were amazing.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was always a fan of theirs, and just that whole relapse scene. Yeah, they did some good shit. Um, what else? Of course, we got to play with Bloodlet a few times in Florida, and they were
Yeah, I've
always
seen them a few
really
times. They
great.
were awesome too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a, could say, a big influence on our sound too. Just coming from South Florida and getting to see them and play with them eventually, it was nice. I mean, we played a bunch of like festivals, or uh, so you kind of playing with them, but it's not like the intimacy of a real show. You're not like sharing a backstage or something.
Right, right. I remember when I moved down to West Palm Beach, and I opened up a tattoo shop with a guy who is very deceitful. It was a bad experience, but I did meet John Wiley. He was super nice. He brought us like a bunch of CDs. He's like, here for your shop. And I was like, oh man, I'd love to come see you guys live. He's like, don't dance. I was like, what? He's like, people have to get to know you. Otherwise, everyone just piles on. They try and beat you up.
Right. Yeah.
Was a lot of that kind of like
I,
middlecore gang violence going on down there?
I mean, there was definitely certain shows that it would pop off pretty hard, like for no reason too, because like you said, it would just be like some guy that was just maybe from a different county that was just dancing a little bit too hard for their
You're right.
liking, and they would just be like, check them.
Or he hit the wrong guy, or
Yeah, I don't know. I was always kind of I mean, I would get in the pit for certain bands, but very very rare. So I was just like kind of like not involved in a lot of the violence that would happen down, especially like Miami shows. We definitely had their own style, like a lot of like the Miami Ninja tropes began down there for a reason. There was definitely a lot of like early jiu-jitsu adopters like going to hardcore shows down there.
we're trying to pull off jiu-jitsu on some other guy,
Yeah, just
like
a
trying to
lot
pull
of
off
like
moves or
a
whatever.
lot of spin kicking and that kind of shit.
Right. Well, that's more taekwondo. I know because I've done taekwondo and I do jiu-jitsu too. But it's funny because jiu-jitsu is not really like a stand-up thing, is it?
Right, it's
So
more floor stuff. Well, yeah,
yeah.
I'm I guess not being technical, but yeah, it was definitely the only other place that kind of I saw that kind of like style of dancing was in Syracuse. I remember
Okay.
playing a fest there and just like looking into the pit and be like, oh yeah, this reminds me of Miami, like just the style of dancing and all that. But maybe that was just like the evolution of it, you know, and you just start to notice it in other scenes.
Well, I think most big cities, have a gang or like, they have like a metalcore, like a
Mm.
tribe or whatever. And like
Right.
I know that New York had one. They had a couple crews, but one was called IDS. And I remember I went to go see a band at we have a club called Castle Heights. It's not there anymore, but I went to go see God Forbid there,
Uh-huh.
and I'm outside, and some skinny guy who was a member of like the gang picked a fight with the guy that was like way bigger than him just because he could. He's like, "Oh, why'd you look at me like that?" And then he ends up like the guy gets beat up by like five guys because one guy started a fight with him over basically nothing.
Right.
And I know that same thing would happen like in Boston. There were like hardcore gangs up there. Was that kind of going on in Florida too?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of kind of skinhead type shit happening, like racist skinheads showing up to shows and
Right.
being, you know, outwardly aggressive, like knowing that they're picking fights and knowing like they're starting shit.
But that
Um,
happened more in Florida because
yeah, it
I lived
definitely,
in DC for a while, and the skinheads would they go into the hospital because
yeah,
DC is mostly black.
uh-huh, yeah. And so there was some of that, and like I think also just being in Miami, there's a lot of like just people that get different ideas about what's happening at these shows and they going in with the idea of fighting, you know. So
Right.
I think like even just to give you an example, I think maybe I'm just making two stories into one, but there was like a melee that broke out like at a Texas is the Reason show at this small club at Cheers because there was like
Of all the bands.
yeah, it was like uh, I don't even. I think it was like a pretty soft show for like my friend's nose getting broken. You
Right.
know. So yeah, like
Yeah,
it
that
was just
happened to
like
be the
people that
Hebrew
are
show.
there that are just like, oh, I heard this is where the hardcore show is, and I'm gonna like just be aggressive. And when I'm sure somebody was like, I'm just trying to watch Texas is the Reason, dude, chill, you know, and maybe just got misunderstood or whatever, you know. So yeah, I think people find themselves in the wrong situation a lot of the times, and people at hardcore shows weren't as tolerant maybe back then.
Well, I remember they had like a show. It was the headliner was Cradle of Filth, but like one of the opening acts was Vision Disorder. So Vision Disorder comes. I know it's weird.
Yeah, that's a
So
weird mix.
Vision Disorder comes on, and people start like windmilling and everything. And you have all like the middle kids that came from like Queens, and they're all like looking around like. What's going on? They're like starting to get mad, but then they notice a bunch of people are doing it. It was a very strange show.
Yeah.
It was like Vision Disorder, God forbid, and Cradle of Filth.
Wow, yeah, that's quite a mix.
Are you kind of have you gotten kind of out of the music scene, or are you doing the band currently? What are you working on right now?
um I haven't done a band in about 5 years. Is the last band that I was seriously doing, and then right before, well, and then in the middle of the pandemic, I was starting to play guitar in this new band in Brooklyn, and that was right around the time that I decided to move to Chicago now. So I'm not really working on anything, but I'm getting the itch to do so. But since we were talking about Bird of Ill Omen, I've done a few bands since then. most of them in New York. I was there for about 20 years, and so I was able to, play with a few of the. I did a couple shows with um, Bird of Ill Omen, and I did a show with Morning Again playing guitar in Belgium. So that was, just kind of keeping myself busy when I can, playing music, but not pursuing it in the way that I was, when I was younger. Just more of a, scratching an itch. And
So what are you like more focused on different style now, or are you still kind of influenced by the same thing and like doing more or less the same style?
well, when I was living in New York, I played in a band called Pagan Girls, which was basically the rhythm section for the Mercury program, which is instrumental post rock kind of uh, band from Florida, and but that was kind of more guitar riffing driven and somewhat aggressive, but and then after that, I started a band called O Bones with Robert or Bob from uh, Life called A Life Once Lost, and some Syracuse buds, and I was playing bass with that, and that was kind of like a power violence grindcore type of thing, which was a lot of fun to write for and do that project. It just didn't really
What
uh
kind of like ass suck or something like that?
not so grindy like that. I'll definitely send you a link.
Okay.
Yeah, it was we were just trying to do like caveman grind. That was our
What is caveman grind?
old bones. That's it.
Would it be
Just like
like
very rudimentary.
mortuary or something? Mortician.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I have a really hard time like comparing and like making like uh comparisons about my own stuff sometimes. Like because I try to like approach it from a, almost like an outsider point of view. Um, but yeah, I'll definitely send you some and let me know what you think.
Okay, yeah, I'll check it out. Do you have
um,
some of those? Like, it seems like every band has those Poison the Well screams and singing. Like after Poison the Well broke out big with Opposite December, it seems
right.
like every band wants to, and it is almost de rigueur with all new metalcore bands that they do that.
Yeah, that was definitely a turning point at that time, like yeah, 2000, well, 99 to 2001. There was like, okay, all the bands, the singer has to sing and scream now. That's
Right.
it. Like starting now,
Even
like
if they can't sing.
yeah, even if they can't. If not, the guitar player's got to do it. But yeah, it was definitely a style like that's kind of basically around the time I removed myself, well, especially not playing in Bird of Ill Omen. I wasn't really like that in key or tune with what was happening in that more aggressive hardcore scene, like Poison the Well. I mean, I knew those guys, but I wasn't really like following their music or their arc. I had no idea how big they got until like years later. I was like, oh shit, I had no idea. Like, a lot of those metalcore bands got like a lot more
Exposure and like radio
recognition,
play and
whatever.
stuff.
Yeah. So it was cool that to Shai Hulud, got a huge record under their belt early on there in the metalcore. So anytime that genre gets brought up, they're like the forefathers,
Uh,
which is rightly deserved because they that early stuff was just I'm most familiar with is like really
like
great.
Hearts When Nourished. I thought that was a
Yeah,
groundbreaker. I'd never heard anything like that when it came out.
yeah, absolutely. And I remember like uh Matt Fox like playing that record for me in his bedroom and like and just being floored. And then I was like, "Oh, here, let me play you my our record." And he was like, "Oh, I really like these guitar tones." And I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" Like, but he did eventually go for the rack mount, which I was using. So maybe he did like the guitar tone. I don't know. Um, but yeah, yeah, great groundbreaking record for sure. But yeah, at that time, I just kind of like I said, I moved to Gainesville and I played with as friends Russ for a little bit. So
Okay.
we were doing a lot more of that style of hardcore, kind of writing more melodic stuff and uh, just opening myself up to different types of music and just being more trying to be more of a musician than like in just a hardcore band.
It seems like, and I'm going to sound like an old man when I say this, but it seems like a lot of the bands, whether they were metal or metalcore or whatever, especially metalcore, had a lot more to say. They tried to tell you stories or events in their life or whatever, and now
Mhm.
it's like, well, the broader the appeal, the better. Like I
Yeah,
remember some of the Bird Ill Omen ones, like they were talking about like models and people like like trying to alter looks for popularity and so on. And I was like,
yeah,
it's nice because it's relevant. Or like the guy lyrics, all the dead guy lyrics. It seems like they're well thought out, well written, scribed or something.
yeah, definitely. The first record for Bird of Ill Omen was, I think half of it was Damien's lyrics, which were personal and like kind of I guess what do you call it? Like dealing with the existential part of life and just suicidal thoughts and those kind of things where you have as a teenager and just being in a depressive state of mind, I guess, and that I think a lot of people can relate to. And then the other half is like me and Tom and Shane writing together as as a unit to serve the song. So yeah, like we were definitely like, okay, this song we have a message and a statement. Like Sharpshooter, uh, Tom had lost some friends, back then to some overdoses, and at the time we weren't a straight edge band, but I think we were all pretty much, well, except for Shane, we were all pretty drug free, straight edge, and but it was kind of like our way of writing that type of song, and that was I guess our message, and I'd tweak a line here or a line there, and we kind of wrote things together. And like that other song, like Mannequin, about the models, I think it was kind of going to school with these like a lot of like very poshy type of high school girls, and just having these like fantasy thoughts about these personalities and the way of life and how we you know certain people glob onto the material things and the the appearance, the self appearance.
Or it might be again. I'm going to sound like an old man when I say this, but like it seems to me like there was a way more variety of style back then. Like I mean, you had like Red Roses for Blue Lady, and
Hmm.
then you had you guys, and then you had Dillinger. There were all these different bands with different sounds. You'd have Converge, you could have like Harvest, you could have
Yeah,
but none like they didn't have like one specific formula. It seems like a lot of bands now have a specific formula. That the whole like singing, screaming thing, like a little bit of at the gates riffing in there. Like
yeah.
what do you think that kind of unified into more of like kind of a bland style? Do you have an opinion on that?
uh in my opinion, I think you know I always just thought we were a hardcore band. And
Well, that's another thing. Like a lot of people seem to have lost the connection to like hardcore and punk, and like they're like, we just want to be metal.
metal and heavy and
Yeah,
doomy and all that, which, you know, I do appreciate and like a lot of different types of bands and sounds. But for us at that time, I considered us a hardcore band, and we just had like influences that anybody else could have used or had. They just, you know, maybe had a more of like a, oh, I'm gonna play like a mouthpiece type of band, or, you know, this is what's happening right now, so I'm gonna do like a old school style band, or, you know, what do they call it, like a, I'm blanking on the name, but yeah, just like uh we had a, I just, yeah, like I said, we just thought we were a hardcore band, and I grew up listening to all sorts of different stuff, and if that seeped in there somehow, then I didn't know it at the time. I would listen, you know, to death metal and punk stuff and all sorts of
you're
different
just playing what
influences.
sounded good to you. Like you put
Yeah,
together like that sounds great. You weren't like concerned
yeah,
about like matching a style, but I guess it's also less commercially viable. So it wasn't you weren't really worried about what sells better. It's more what sounds better.
yeah. We were just, you know, riffing. We would get to the next part and be like, well, I think this could go pretty good. And you would just write the next part and just hope it kept the song alive, you know, and not being like, oh, is this what it's gonna get like people moving, you know?
Right.
Am I writing a breakdown, or what is like, it was just never really thought like, oh, what's gonna be considered cool, or uh like heavy or whatever. At that
Right.
time we definitely weren't like, oh, we gotta write the heaviest riff ever, you know. So
The Casey string. I like early Casey string, but like super super fucking heavy.
uh-huh. Yeah, but like you mentioned, Red Roses for Blue Lady, like those guys were all buds of ours, and yeah, they had their own style. Like they were all hardcore kids, but you know, they were just doing it a little bit more tech metal. Like uh, Brian was is a great guitar player, and he wrote what he wrote, and you know, he had the the influences that he had to make that band sound the way they did. Um, but yeah, I think at the time a lot of bands were looking to the Converges and the Dillinger for like that push of like, oh, they can play like that. Well, shit, maybe I can try playing like that a little bit, or incorporating some of that fire that they were bringing into that scene. You know,
Right.
the just that competency of guitar playing, which, you know, you weren't seeing on a Chain of Strength record. You know,
Well, quite a bit different than like Converge.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, even compared to the Converge's like early stuff, they were doing hardcore with these very like moody influences, like more of like, you know, the maybe kind of DC sound, or more
Right.
like alternative sound, like just darker, moodier stuff. Like on Hail on a Haystack, there's like all sorts of just like, is this hardcore? It's not quite, but you know, but it was definitely
I feel like
going
once
in
they
a
got
different
to
direction.
positioning the empty sky, that was like that was their peak. That's when they finally like realized themselves as a band.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like defining their sound
Yeah.
from then on. Yeah.
Were any of those like big influence, or just like everybody was like kind of like I want to do my thing?
I mean, for me, I would say, yeah, Converge and Dead Guy and Bloodlet for sure were like big influences on what I wanted to play in a band,
Okay.
and what to sound like. Just, you know, aggressive singing, uh, and just yeah, those I would say those are like top influences for me at that time. And then there was always the reluctancy to listen to a lot of hardcore bands because also didn't want to be like so influenced. So a lot of the times, I would just listen to totally different stuff, like Tori Amos, for instance. For some reason at that time, I was just like getting into piano, so listening to stuff completely out of the genre, and listening to Radiohead and listening to different type of sonic bands where you're like, oh, that's a cool thing, and try to bring that in and make it more hardcore, I guess. That was a lot of my influences too. Like I would just try to copy other type of styles and try to make it my own and bring it into a harder context.
Okay. That they're definitely like that when your band came out, that seemed like kind of like the peak of everybody doing their own thing. There's a lot of crap, but there's a lot of great stuff out there too.
Hmm. Yeah, just being open to how music can sound is like that's creativity. That's
Right.
how you can get to, like, for instance, I was playing something for my wife the other day, like a demo that I'd worked on, and she was like, "Oh, I like this part. This is cool." And I was like, "Oh yeah, this is like my insert artist that I ripped off here." And she's like, "Oh, I never would have guessed it, but now that you say it, I can't unhear it." And it's like, for me, I know exactly where that connection is, but for the listener, it's like a totally brand new thing out of context. So when you like peel back the curtain a little bit, it gives it some context. So yeah, like there's certainly things that I'm sure I brought to all of my bands where I was just like riffing around on something really out of the way, and then just somehow brought it in to work for that band.
And drop it down like
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
All right, man. Well, I don't want to keep you here all day, but you want to tell me do you have any other projects or way that people can keep up with what you're doing right now?
Um, no, I don't really have anything to plug, man. I'm not really. I'm looking forward to getting some. I have some demos that I've been kind of sitting on and trying to get together an idea of what to do next. So yeah, either starting a new project or just doing like a bedroom recording thing where I just finish up a bunch of songs ideas that I have. That's basically it for me.
Are you thinking of like horror stuff or more like Lou Barlow, Sebado, like acoustic
Oh,
guitar?
that's you're right there on the right path with that. I love Lou Barlow and Sebadoh. Yeah, it's a little bit of both actually. I have a a folder full of some like kind of riffs that I was entertaining with Bird of Ill Omen to, if we were to do another record, or because we gotten together a few times over the past couple of years, and it was always just like out there, like, oh, let's try to keep the idea going. So I have some ideas there that I've never really had success in starting up anything with those guys at least. And then I have just other project ideas that I've working on my own. But yeah, it's just like I said, it's just like painting the canvas. It's you listen back and you're like, oh yeah, maybe now I can add this part. You look back and then add a little layer there, a little layer there, and maybe the painting will be finished someday.
Maybe you could like try a whole new genre, like mumble rap or something.
Humble rap. Oh yeah. Well, the new one is the rap.
Yeah. But all right, man. Well, thank you very much for doing this. Thanks
Yeah,
for
man, my
getting
pleasure.
back to me. I appreciate it. I had a good time. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, I had a great time talking about all this stuff. And just want to leave you with that I was just like very glad that you reached out to do this because I still have this folder that you sent me. Well, you sent to Tom because that was his address on the mailing. But you
Okay.
sent us a folder of all your art,
Okay.
and I pulled it out recently, and I was just like, oh shit, this is like that Coalesce record.
Right.
Uh, and then there's like that indecision stuff, and I was just like, yeah, like why didn't we get you to do stuff for us? You know, like I don't know why we
Well,
never
I
like
definitely
got
would
you
have,
to do
but
it.
I love you guys' music.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's a rad connection that we were able to do this, 30 years later, basically.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much for doing this again. And
Yeah,
do you
thank
have
you.
anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good, man.
All right.
Appreciate
Well,
the
again,
attention.
thank you, and I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, take care.